Commander Jack Vance had never planned on becoming humanity's accidental diplomat. As he stood at the viewport of Outpost Epsilon 9, watching the twin suns of the Cygnus system cast their orange-purple glow across the barren moonscape, he wondered not for the first time how his military career had led him to this god-forsaken rock. Still admiring the view, Commander? 37 days of the same sunset, you'd think the novelty would wear off. Lieutenant Rhea Thorne approached from behind, her boots making a distinctive clack-scrape sound that Jack had come to recognize without looking. She was his second-in-command, brilliant, sarcastic, and possessing exactly zero patience for what she called Jack's philosophical bullshit moments. "It's not the sunset I'm looking at," Jack replied, tapping the reinforced glass. "It's what's beyond it." "Ah, Morkani territory," Rhea said, her tone shifting from playful to professional. "Intel says they've been quiet. Too quiet." "Exactly. That's what worries me. The Morkani. 8 feet tall, exoskeleton-clad warriors with a hive-like social structure and an unfortunate tendency to view all other sentient species as either threats to be eliminated or resources to be harvested. Humanity had stumbled into their territory 3 years ago, and the resulting conflict had been educational. Humans learned that our scrappy unpredictability made us surprisingly effective against the Morkani's rigid battle doctrines. The Morkani learned that humans were, as their diplomatic corps so eloquently put it, infuriatingly difficult to exterminate. The commander, message from the mess hall. The base AI, affectionately dubbed Chip by the crew, chimed in through Jack's comm implant. Sergeant Barlow says, and I quote, "If Commander Vance misses dinner again while staring dramatically into space, I'm putting him on nutrient paste for a week." Jack grinned. "Tell Marcus I'll be there in 5. Rhea laughed. "You'd better hurry. I heard he actually managed to make the synthetic protein taste like genuine chicken this time." "A miracle of modern science," Jack replied, turning from the viewport. As they walked through the curved corridors of Epsilon 9, they passed technical specialist Zeke Rodriguez, who was elbow-deep in a maintenance panel, muttering creatively profane suggestions about the panel's maternal heritage. "Problems, Zeke?" Jack asked. "Nothing fatal, Commander. Just the atmospheric recyclers being temperamental again." Zeke's face was a study in focused frustration, his cybernetic eye whirring as it adjusted to the dim light of the access panel. "I keep telling Command these Mark IV systems aren't designed for the dust storms on this rock. But apparently my 3 engineering degrees aren't as persuasive as their procurement budget." "Keep at it," Jack said. "And join us for dinner when you're done. That's an order." The mess hall was the heart of Epsilon 9, a converted cargo bay with mismatched furniture and all screens perpetually displaying Earth news that was at least 3 weeks outdated. The outpost housed 37 humans total, 20 soldiers, 12 scientists, and 5 support staff. All of them living on humanity's farthest military installation, a mere 17 light-years from Earth, but definitely feeling like the ass end of nowhere. Dr. Diana Frost waved them over to her table. The exobiologist had joined the outpost 6 months ago and had spent most of that time analyzing Morkani biological samples with manic enthusiasm. "Hey, Commander." "Lieutenant, I was just telling Marcus about my latest findings on Morkani pheromone communication," she said, practically bouncing in her seat. Her snow-white hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes had the slightly unfocused look of someone who'd been staring into microscopes for too long. "Please tell me this conversation isn't happening during dinner," Rhea groaned as she sat down. "Don't worry," Sergeant Marcus Barlow said, sliding trays in front of them both. "I threatened to withhold dessert if she mentioned exoskeleton secretions again." The mess sergeant's burly frame and perpetual scowl hid the fact that he cared for the crew's morale almost as much as their nutrition. Jack looked down at his tray. "This actually looks like chicken." "Just eat it before it gets cold, Commander," Marcus rumbled. "And maybe next time don't spend an hour brooding at the viewport like you're posing for a recruitment poster." As Jack ate, he observed his makeshift family. They were an odd bunch thrown together by military assignments and scientific curiosity, but they worked. Every person on this outpost was here because they were the best at what they did. or because they were just weird enough that no one else would take them. What none of them knew was that Jack had received a classified transmission from command that morning. Morkani battle groups had been detected moving toward their sector. The quiet was about to end. Jack just hoped they were ready for the noise. Nobody ever tells you that interstellar warfare begins with paperwork. Jack was knee-deep in it when the first alarm sounded. Proximity alert. Chip's voice lost its usual casual tone. Multiple unidentified vessels approaching from the Morkani border. ETA 3 minutes. Jack's head snapped up from his terminal. Sound General Quarters. All personnel to battle stations. Rhea, meet me in the command center. By the time Jack reached the command center, the large tactical display was lit up like a demented Christmas tree. 7 Morkani vessels, 5 fighters and 2 larger ships were approaching Epsilon 9 at attack velocity. So much for them being quiet, Rhea said, sliding into her station. Defensive systems online. Railgun batteries charging. Communications? Jack asked. Nothing but static on all channels, replied Communications Officer Patel, her fingers dancing across her console. They're jamming us hard, sir. Of course they are, Jack muttered. Chip, status of our fighters? All 4 fighters prepped and pilots heading to launch bays. The AI responded. Estimated launch time, 90 seconds. Jack studied the tactical display. 4 human fighters against 7 Morkani vessels was bad odds. But the Morkani always attacked in predictable formations. It was practically hardwired into their hive mentality. Zeke, are you patched in? Jack called over the comm. In the maintenance shaft under Sector 7, Commander, came the technician's voice, punctuated by the sound of tools clanking. Kind of busy preventing our atmosphere from venting. I need to know if those sensor modifications you've been working on are operational. There was a brief pause. You mean the ones Command explicitly said were unnecessary and potentially compromising to standard systems? Those modifications? Those would be the ones, yes. Fully operational as of yesterday, sir. I just didn't file the paperwork yet. Jack could hear the grin in Zeke's voice. Perfect. Patch the feed to my station. The tactical display shimmered and then snapped into higher definition as Zeke's custom sensors came online. The Morkani ships were now visible in much greater detail, including their shield distribution and weapon status. They're coming in hot, Rhea observed. Standard Morkani attack pattern Delta. Textbook stuff. Too textbook, Jack agreed. Almost like they want us to know exactly what they're doing. The first volley from the Morkani ships hit Epsilon 9's shields, which flared bright blue against the starfield. Shields holding at 92%, reported Security Chief Gallo, a woman who'd survived 3 previous Morkani engagements and had the scars to prove it. But they're concentrating fire on our eastern quadrant. One more volley like that, and we'll have localized failures. Jack nodded, his mind racing. Launch our fighters, but tell them to hold a defensive position, Charlie. Don't pursue. Rhea shot him a look. Standard protocol is immediate engagement, sir. The Morkani expect standard protocol. Let's disappoint them. Jack switched to the station-wide comm. All personnel, this is Commander Vance. We have Morkani vessels engaging. Maintain defensive positions. Medical team to prepare for potential casualties. Science team to secure all sensitive research. The outpost shuddered as another blast hit the shields. Shields at 81%, Gallo announced. Eastern quadrant down to 63%. Jack studied the attack pattern again, noticing something odd. The Morkani fighters were pressing the attack, but the 2 larger vessels were holding back, just at the edge of weapons range. They're looking for something, Jack realized aloud. This isn't just an attack, it's a probe. A probe for what? Rhea asked. I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. Jack opened a channel to the fighter squadron. Echo Squadron, this is Commander Vance. New orders. I want a focused counterattack on the lead fighter. But I want you to make it look sloppy, like you're panicking. Make it look sloppy, sir, came the confused voice of Squadron Leader Ortiz. Exactly. Like you're making mistakes. I want them to think they have us rattled. As Echo Squadron engaged, Jack watched the Morkani response carefully. Sure enough, 3 of the 5 enemy fighters broke formation to pursue what they perceived as an easy kill, leaving gaps in their defense. Railguns targeted on coordinates I'm sending now, Jack instructed Gallo. To fire on my mark. The coordinates he sent weren't aimed at any of the Morkani ships. Instead, they targeted a point in space just ahead of where the 2 larger vessels were stationed. Sir, there's nothing at those coordinates, Gallo pointed out. Not yet, Jack replied. Fire. The station's railguns released their payload, accelerating metal projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. The shots sailed harmlessly through empty space, at least, what appeared to be empty space, until they hit something. A Morkani stealth vessel suddenly materialized, its cloaking field disrupted by the impact. The ship listed to one side, clearly damaged. How did you know that was there? Rhea demanded, shocked. I didn't, Jack admitted. But the Morkani never commit resources without a specific objective. This wasn't a random attack, they were looking for something. The question was what, and the answer had to be either information or a person. Given their positioning, they were preparing for extraction, not just destruction. The tactical situation quickly shifted. With their stealth advantage lost, the Morkani vessels began to retreat, all except the damaged stealth ship, which was now drifting, its engines offline. Should we pursue? Gallo asked, her finger hovering over the weapons controls. Jack shook his head. No, hold position and maintain defensive stance, and let them go. Sir, Patel called out, I'm detecting a single life sign aboard the disabled vessel. It's faint, but stable. Jack made a quick decision. Prep a boarding team, full combat gear. But I want them under strict orders, secure the vessel and take any survivors prisoner. No unnecessary force. You want to capture a Morkani? Rhea asked incredulously. I want answers, Jack replied. And it seems we've just been handed the perfect opportunity to get them. 4 hours later, the boarding team returned with an unconscious Morkani officer strapped to a medical gurney. Dr. Frost was practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of studying a live specimen, while Security Chief Gallo looked like she'd rather space the alien than bring it aboard. Jack stared down at the unconscious form. The Morkani was larger than he'd expected, nearly 9 feet tall, with the characteristic exoskeletal plates in a deep purple-blue hue that denoted high rank in their society. Its forearms were securely restrained, and its mandibles were clamped shut with a specially designed muzzle. What's the status on the translator implant? Jack asked. Functional, Dr. Frost replied, though Morkani dialect patterns are complex. We might get the literal translation, but cultural context will be challenging. When will it regain consciousness? Hard to say. Their physiology processes sedatives differently than ours. It could be minutes, could be hours. Jack nodded slowly. Have it moved to the high-security holding cell. I want 2 guards on it at all times, and I want to be notified the moment it wakes up. As the medical team wheeled away their unusual patient, Rhea pulled Jack aside. Sir, Command's going to want to know about this. They'll probably order immediate transfer of the prisoner to a core system facility. Probably, Jack agreed. But we're experiencing communication difficulties due to Morkani jamming technology, remember. It might take a while for their orders to reach us. Rhea's eyebrows shot up. Are you suggesting we conveniently can't receive transmissions? I'm suggesting that in the aftermath of an attack, communication systems are notoriously unreliable, Jack replied with a perfectly straight face. Wouldn't you agree, Lieutenant? A slow smile spread across Rhea's face. Absolutely, Commander. Could take days to sort out those communication bugs. Exactly. And in the meantime, we have a guest to entertain. The Morkani officer regained consciousness with a chittering hiss that made the hair on the back of Jack's neck stand up. Its 4 eyes, compound structures that reflected light like black opals, darted around the holding cell before fixing on Jack with unnerving intensity. Can you understand me? Jack asked, standing just outside the energy barrier that separated them. The alien's translator implant buzzed and clicked before it responded in a voice that sounded like gravel being crushed. I understand your primitive vocalizations. Human. Good. I'm Commander Jack Vance of the Earth Defense Force. You're aboard Outpost Epsilon 9, being held as a prisoner of war. According to your insignia and ship designation, you're a high commander in the Morkani fleet. Do you have a name I can address you by? The Morkani's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or contempt. Jack couldn't tell which. Names are a weakness. A vulnerability you humans insist on maintaining. I am Tactical Overseer, 13th Hive, 4th Conquest Fleet. That's quite a mouthful. Mind if I call you TAC for short? The alien's head tilted slightly. Your attempt at familiarity is noted and rejected. Fair enough, Tactical Overseer, Jack said, deliberately using the title. I have some questions for you, and I will provide no answers. The Morkani replied immediately. I am prepared for your torture techniques. My exoskeleton is designed to withstand significant physical trauma. My neural pathways have been chemically altered to resist pain. You will extract nothing of value from me. Jack blinked. Torture? We don't torture prisoners of war. The Morkani made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. Your deception is ineffective. All species torture their captives. It is universal law. The only variable is methodology. Well, I hate to disappoint you, but we're not planning to torture you. That's not how we operate. The alien's 4 eyes narrowed simultaneously. Then you will administer truth drugs, mind-altering compounds. Perhaps your primitive psychic technologies. None of the above, Jack said, pulling up a chair and sitting down. We're just going to talk. There was a long silence as the Morkani processed this statement. Finally, it spoke again. This is clearly the first phase of psychological warfare. You will establish false rapport, offer comfort, then remove it systematically to break mental resistance. This approach is documented in 17 species interrogation protocols. Jack sighed and rubbed his temples. This was going to be more difficult than he'd anticipated. Look, I'm not trying to break you. I just want to understand why you attacked our outpost. Because you are enemies to be eliminated, the Morkani stated, as if explaining a simple concept to a dim child. All non-Morkani sentients are either threats or resources. You have proven too troublesome to be harvested as resources. Therefore, elimination is the logical path. But why now? Why this specific outpost? Your attack wasn't a full-scale assault, it was targeted. Precise, you were looking for something. The Morkani went silent, its exoskeletal plates shifting subtly in what Jack suspected might be their version of discomfort. Interesting, Jack noted. So there was a specific objective. Your primitive deductive reasoning is flawed, the alien countered, but there was a slight delay in the response that Jack didn't miss. The door to the observation room slid open, and Dr. Frost entered, carrying a datapad. Commander, sorry to interrupt, but I thought you might find this relevant. She handed him the pad, which displayed a chemical analysis. Jack scanned it quickly. You're sure about this? Absolutely, Diana confirmed. The biological samples from the Morkani vessel show traces of a very specific compound. It's similar to a pheromone their species uses for identification, but it's been artificially modified. Jack turned back to the Morkani prisoner. You were tracking someone. A specific Morkani, one who's been modified to emit a distinctive chemical signature. The alien's reaction was subtle but unmistakable, a ripple across its exoskeletal plates that Jack interpreted as surprise. A defector, Jack continued, now more confident. That's who you were looking for. A Morkani who left the hive. Impossible. The alien snapped, its voice causing the translator to crackle with intensity. No Morkani would defect. It is biologically contrary to our nature. Hive loyalty is encoded in our genetic structure. And yet someone did, Jack pressed. Someone important enough that your fleet sent a high-ranking officer with a stealth ship to track them down. That seems like a lot of effort for someone who couldn't possibly exist. The Morkani's 4 arms strained against their restraints. If such an abomination existed, it would be a biological imperative to eliminate it. Genetic deviation threatens the purity of the hive. So you were sent to kill this defector, not capture them. Elimination is the only appropriate response to betrayal, the Morkani stated emphatically. Jack nodded slowly. I see. And if you failed in your mission, what would happen to you upon your return to the hive? The alien went very still. I would not return. Failure is unacceptable. You mean they'd kill you for failing? It is not death, the Morkani corrected. It is reclamation. My biological materials would be repurposed for the benefit of the hive, my consciousness deemed flawed and dissolved. Jack exchanged a look with Dr. Frost, whose scientific curiosity was now tempered with a hint of horror. So, Jack summarized, you're here hunting a defector who shouldn't exist, and if you don't succeed, you'll be reclaimed by your own people. That's quite a motivational structure you've got there. Your judgment is irrelevant. Hive efficiency requires the removal of flawed components. Jack leaned forward. And you don't find that even a little bit problematic? That your entire society is built on the premise that individuals are disposable. Individual survival is a primitive concept, the Morkani replied. The hive survives. That is all that matters. Then why are you so afraid right now? Jack asked quietly. The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly. I experience no fear. Fear is inefficient. Your exoskeletal plates have been vibrating at an increasing frequency since we started discussing your potential failure. Dr. Frost tells me that's a stress response in your species. Your respiration has increased by approximately 15%, and there's a distinctive odor your species emits under duress. So, with all due respect, tactical overseer, I think you're terrified. The Morkani's response was immediate and violent. It lunged against its restraints with enough force that alarms began blaring. I demand immediate execution. It is my right as a captured military officer to be eliminated rather than subjected to psychological torture. Jack stood calmly, even as security personnel rushed into the observation room. No one's going to execute you. In fact, no one's going to harm you at all while you're in our custody. You must. The alien insisted, its translator struggling to keep up with its agitated clicks and hisses. It is the proper protocol. All species eliminate captured enemy commanders to prevent intelligence leaks. Not us, Jack said simply. That's not how humans operate. As he turned to leave, the Morkani called after him, its voice now carrying an emotion the translator rendered as desperate confusion. What do you intend to do with me, human? Jack paused at the door. For now, make sure you're properly fed, treated for any injuries, and kept comfortable. Then we'll talk again tomorrow. He left the holding cell, followed by Dr. Frost, who was rapidly taking notes on her pad. Once they were in the corridor and out of the Morkani's hearing, she turned to him. That was unexpected, she said. Its reaction to potential survival was far more extreme than its reaction to potential death. It's afraid of something worse than death, Jack replied thoughtfully. And I think I'm starting to understand what. Command wants the prisoner transferred immediately. Admiral Helena Winter's hologram flickered slightly as she delivered the order. The transmission had finally gotten through after what Jack maintained was unfortunate communication interference. But what was, in reality, Zeke deliberately bouncing their signals through 3 different relay stations to create plausible delay. With all due respect, Admiral, Jack replied, transferring the prisoner now would be premature. We're just beginning to understand their psychology and motivations. Admiral Winter's a career military officer with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite by someone who didn't particularly like granite narrowed her eyes. This isn't a scientific expedition, Commander. That Morkani officer is a high-value intelligence asset. Central Command wants it interrogated by specialists. By specialists, you mean military intelligence officers who will use whatever means necessary to extract information, Jack said flatly. I mean professionals who understand the stakes of this conflict, the Admiral countered. The Morkani have attacked 7 human colonies in the past year. They've shown no interest in diplomacy or ceasefires. They consider us vermin to be exterminated. So forgive me if I don't shed tears over one of their officers facing harsh questioning." Jack took a deep breath. "Admiral, in the 48 hours we've had the prisoner, we've learned more about Morkani psychology and social structure than in 3 years of conflict. Dr. Frost believes we're on the verge of a significant breakthrough in understanding their motivations." "And how exactly have you achieved this breakthrough? Because your reports indicate the prisoner has been largely uncooperative." "We've been treating it with dignity," Jack said simply. "And that, more than anything else, seems to be causing psychological distress. The Morkani expect brutality from their enemies because that's all they understand. When we don't behave according to their expectations, it creates cognitive dissonance." The Admiral's hologram crossed its arms. "So your strategy is? Being nice to it?" "My strategy is demonstrating that humans don't operate by the same rules as the Morkani hive mind, and it's working." Admiral Winters was silent for a long moment. "You have 72 hours, Commander. After that, the prisoner gets transferred to Central Command, and I don't want to hear any more convenient communication malfunctions. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, Admiral. Thank you." As the hologram flickered off, Rhea, who had been standing silently in the corner of Jack's office, let out a low whistle, a phrase that went better than expected. "She thinks I'm wasting time," Jack replied. "But she's smart enough to know that traditional interrogation methods haven't worked on the Morkani we've captured in the past." "So what now?" Rhea asked. "We've got 3 days to, what exactly? Befriend the giant bug that wants to exterminate our species." "Not befriend. Understand." Jack stood and began pacing. "Everything we know about the Morkani suggests they operate on absolute principles. Loyalty to the hive is paramount. Failure is unacceptable. Enemies are to be eliminated. These aren't just cultural values, they're hardwired biological imperatives. Right, which makes them predictable, but also incredibly difficult to negotiate with." "Exactly. But what if there's a crack in that biological programming? What if the existence of a defector proves their system isn't as perfect as they believe?" Rhea's eyes widened. "You think this defector is significant because it shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about their biology. And everything they believe about themselves," Jack added. "The tactical overseer isn't just afraid of failing its mission, it's terrified by the implications of that defector's existence. It suggests their entire worldview might be flawed." Before Rhea could respond, Chip's voice came over the comm. "Commander, the prisoner is requesting your presence, it appears." Agitated, Jack exchanged a look with Rhea. "On my way." When Jack entered the holding cell area, he was surprised to find the Morkani not raging or threatening as he expected, but instead perfectly still in the center of the cell, all 4 arms held rigidly at its sides. "You requested to see me?" Jack asked. "I have considered your approach," the alien said, its translator rendering the words with clinical precision. "It is unfamiliar but effective. You seek to destabilize my psychological equilibrium by withholding expected negative stimuli." Jack blinked. "That's a very clinical way of saying we're being decent to you." "Decency is irrelevant. It is merely a tactical choice designed to achieve your objective." The Morkani's head tilted slightly. "I recognize this strategy now. You will extract information not through physical coercion, but through the creation of uncertainty." "You're overthinking this," Jack said, pulling up his chair again. "We're treating you humanely because that's what we do with prisoners of war. It's not a tactic." "All behavior is tactical," the Morkani insisted. "In anticipation of your continued psychological approach, I have decided to offer information in exchange for execution." Jack was taken aback. "You want me to kill you in exchange for intelligence?" "Correct. A fair exchange. I will provide the location of the genetic deviant you seek. In return, you will terminate my existence quickly and efficiently." "Why would you want that?" Jack asked, genuinely confused. The alien's exoskeletal plates rippled in what Dr. Frost had identified as their equivalent of extreme distress. because the alternative is reclamation by the hive after failure, or worse, continued existence as a captured specimen, separated from the hive mind. Both are intolerable. For the first time, Jack heard something in the translator's rendering of the Morkani's voice that sounded genuinely emotional. Not anger or defiance, but something closer to desperation. Being separated from your hive causes you pain, Jack realized aloud. Not physical pain, but something deeper. Isolation is not pain. It is non-existence, the Morkani corrected. A Morkani without the hive connection is not Morkani. It is nothing. A ghost. A failure of biology. Jack leaned forward. Is that what happened to the defector? They somehow survived being cut off from the hive mind? The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly. The deviant's continued biological functioning defies explanation. It should have self-terminated upon disconnection. The fact that it continues to exist is an abomination. Or proof that your species is more adaptable than your leaders want you to believe, Jack suggested. Irrelevant, the Morkani stated firmly. Do you accept my terms? Information for execution? Jack stood up and paced the small observation area. Then he turned back to the prisoner, his decision made. No, I don't accept your terms. The alien's compound eyes fixed on him with what might have been disbelief. Explain your rejection. The tactical advantage of this information is significant. I don't doubt that, Jack agreed. But I'm not going to kill you. Not now. Not ever while you're my prisoner. That's not who we are. Then you will transfer me to your central authority, who will extract the information through traditional methods and then terminate me, the Morkani stated. The outcome is the same, merely delayed. Jack shook his head. No, I'm not transferring you either. Now the alien seemed genuinely confused, its translator struggling to keep up with the rapid clicking of its mandibles. This behavior is illogical. What purpose does keeping me alive serve? Jack stepped closer to the energy barrier. What if I told you there was a third option? What so? Neither execution nor reclamation by your hive. No third option exists. The defector found one. Jack pointed out. They've survived outside the hive. The Morkani went completely still. That existence is not survival, it is perpetual torment. Is it? Or is that just what you've been conditioned to believe? Jack pressed. What if isolation from the hive is only torment because you've never learned to exist as an individual? What if that's a skill that can be developed, just like any other? You suggest adaptation. The concept seemed to disturb the alien deeply. I suggest that you have a choice, Jack replied, not just between death and reclamation, but a third path, a difficult one. Yes, but a path nonetheless. The Morkani was silent for a long time before speaking again. Why would you offer this? We are enemies. Our biological imperatives are opposed. My continued existence threatens your species. Because that's who humans are, Jack said simply. We believe in choice. In the possibility of change, even for those who've tried to destroy us. As Jack turned to leave, the Morkani called after him, the commander. Jack paused. Yes. The information I offered, the defector's location, it is here. On this moon. Hidden in the cave systems beyond your eastern perimeter. That is why we attacked your outpost specifically. Jack nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. I do not understand your choice, the Morkani said, a hint of something almost like wonder in its translated voice. It defies all logical analysis. I know, Jack replied with a small smile. That's kind of our specialty. Word travels fast in the vacuum of space. Not quite faster than light, but close enough when the news is juicy. 3 weeks after Jack's decision to spare the Morkani officer, he found himself addressing not just Admiral Winters, but the entire Earth Defense Force High Command via holographic conference. 9 stern faces stared at him from around a virtual table, none of them looking particularly pleased. Let me see if I understand this correctly. Commander Vance, General Rodriguez said, his thick eyebrows drawn together in what appeared to be a permanent scowl. Not only did you deliberately delay transferring a high-value prisoner, but you also made contact with a Morkani defector without proper authorization. And then he checked his notes in apparent disbelief. You arranged a meeting between the defector and the prisoner? That's an accurate summary, yes, Jack replied, standing at parade rest in his office. And during this unauthorized meeting, the prisoner experienced some kind of psychological breakdown, Admiral Winters added. Not exactly a breakdown, Admiral, Jack clarified, more of a paradigm shift. The tactical overseer encountered irrefutable evidence that Morkani can survive, even thrive outside the hive structure. It was confronted with a reality that contradicted its entire worldview. The defector who called itself Solus now had been surviving in the caves for nearly 8 months after escaping a damaged Morkani scout ship. Rather than perishing from isolation as Morkani doctrine insisted should happen, Solus had adapted. It had developed a sense of individuality, preferences, curiosity, qualities that were supposedly impossible for its species. When Jack had arranged for the tactical overseer to meet Solus, he hadn't known exactly what would happen. What he hadn't expected was for the high-ranking officer to literally freeze in cognitive shock, its nervous system unable to process the contradiction between what should be, according to Morkani biology, and what clearly was. And the prisoner has been in this catatonic state ever since, asked Admiral Winters. For 3 days, yes, Jack confirmed. Dr. Frost believes it's a defensive mechanism, similar to a system reboot. Its mind is attempting to reconcile fundamentally contradictory information. General Rodriguez snorted. So your grand humanitarian gesture resulted in essentially brain damaging our most valuable intelligence asset. Congratulations, Commander. With respect, General, I believe we've gained something far more valuable than whatever intelligence the prisoner might have provided, Jack countered. We've discovered a critical vulnerability in Morkani psychology, one that could potentially change the entire course of the conflict. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Elaborate, ordered Fleet Admiral Chang, who had been quiet until now. The Morkani believe their hive structure is biologically determined, that they literally cannot function as individuals. This belief is central to their society, their military doctrine, everything. But we now have proof that it's false. Jack leaned forward slightly. What happens to a rigidly hierarchical species when they discover their fundamental assumptions about themselves are wrong? Chaos, Admiral Chang replied thoughtfully. The potential collapse of their command structure. Exactly, Jack nodded. The Morkani are terrified of this defector not because one individual went rogue, but because that individual's continued existence threatens their entire social order. If one Morkani can successfully separate from the hive, then others can too. It challenges their entire concept of self. The military leaders exchanged glances, a mix of skepticism and dawning realization crossing their faces. I'm still not convinced that breaking one alien's brain justifies your insubordination, General Rodriguez growled. The prisoner is recovering, Jack countered. According to Dr. Frost, its neural patterns are stabilizing, just in a completely different configuration than before. The tactical overseer is changing. Admiral Winters leaned forward. Changing how, exactly? It's asking questions, Jack said simply, about itself. About the hive. About humans, questions that no Morkani in their rigid hierarchy would ever consider asking. Dr. Frost believes it's developing individual consciousness as a defense mechanism. The only way its mind could resolve the cognitive dissonance was to fundamentally restructure itself. And you believe this, what? Create some kind of psychological weapon against the Morkani? Admiral Chang asked. Not a weapon, Jack corrected. A possibility. The possibility of genuine communication, maybe even peace. If Morkani can learn to function as individuals with free will, they might not be driven by the hive's expansion imperatives. Admiral Winters' expression was thoughtful. You realize the Morkani Hive Council will consider this an act of supreme aggression, don't you? In their view, you've essentially mutilated their officer's mind. Actually, Jack said, that brings me to the most unexpected development. The tactical overseer has asked to communicate with the Morkani fleet. It wants to tell them what it's experienced. The room erupted into objections and arguments. with General Rodriguez's voice cutting through the chaos. Absolutely not. We can't allow a prisoner to contact enemy forces. With all due respect, General, Jack said firmly, I believe this may be the most important opportunity we've encountered in this entire conflict. Your track record of disobeying orders doesn't inspire confidence in your judgment, Commander, Rodriguez snapped. Fleet Admiral Chang held up a hand, silencing the room. What exactly does the prisoner want to communicate, Commander Vance? The truth, Jack replied. That everything the Morkani believe about their biological imperatives is a lie, that they can exist as individuals, that the hive structure is a choice, not a necessity. And you think the Morkani leadership will just accept this revelation and change their entire society overnight? Admiral Winters asked skeptically. No, Jack admitted, but I think it will create doubt, and doubt, in a system built on absolute certainty, is more devastating than any weapon we could deploy. 3 days after the contentious meeting with High Command, Jack stood in the communications center as the tactical overseer, now calling itself Nexus, prepared to broadcast its message to the Morkani fleet that had taken position just outside the Cygnus system. The Earth Defense Force had reluctantly approved the transmission, with multiple fail-safes in place to prevent any hidden codes or signals. Are you certain you want to do this? Jack asked the Morkani, who now moved with a strange, hesitant gait as if still learning how to control its body without the hive mind's guidance. I must, Nexus replied, its translator now calibrated to its changing speech patterns. They deserve to know the truth. That we have been, limited by our own assumptions. Dr. Frost monitored the Morkani's vital signs nearby, still amazed by the neurological transformation she was witnessing. Its brain activity is unlike anything we've recorded in Morkani subjects, she whispered to Jack. New neural pathways forming in real time. When the communication channel opened, the face of a Morkani hive commander filled the screen, an imposing figure with black exoskeletal plates marked with gold insignia. Its mandibles clicked rapidly upon seeing Nexus. Tactical Overseer, 13th Hive, you live. Explain your failure to complete assigned elimination and return to the fleet. Nexus stepped forward, all 4 arms spread in what Solus had explained was a gesture of openness. Hive Commander, I must report a discovery of critical importance. The biological doctrine of our species contains fundamental errors. Isolation from the hive does not result in necessary termination. Individual consciousness is not only possible but may represent an evolutionary advantage. The hive commander's reaction was immediate, and visceral mandibles clicking furiously, compound eyes widening. You have been compromised. Neural corruption detected, reclamation protocols initiated. No, Nexus continued calmly, I have been freed. As can you. As can all Morkani. The hive structure is not biological necessity, it is cultural choice. I have met a Morkani who has lived in isolation for planetary cycles without degradation. I have experienced individual thought without hive connection. It is different, but viable. The hive commander's next words came through the translator as something like horrified disgust. This transmission contains mimetic contamination. All recipients will report for neural cleansing. But Nexus wasn't finished. Before you terminate this communication, know this, the humans could have killed me. It would have been tactically advantageous. Instead, they chose mercy, a concept our doctrine claims is weakness. Yet that mercy has revealed more about our species than 3 cycles of conflict. Perhaps the question is not whether we should destroy humanity, but whether we can learn from them. The transmission cut abruptly as the hive commander severed the connection. The room was silent for a long moment. Well, Rhea said, breaking the tension. That went about as well as expected. Jack turned to Nexus. Are you all right? The Morkani's head tilted in what they'd come to recognize as its version of contemplation. I am uncertain. But I believe the seed has been planted. The question has been asked. And questions once asked cannot be unasked. In the following days, Morkani communication channels exploded with activity. Their fleet formations became erratic, with reports of ships breaking formation or failing to respond to commands. Intelligence intercepts suggested widespread confusion in their ranks, with some units withdrawing entirely from human space. The tactical oversight's simple message had done what 3 years of warfare couldn't. It had introduced doubt into a system that couldn't function without absolute certainty. 6 months later, Jack Vance found himself in a position he'd never anticipated, sitting across a table from representatives of both the Earth Defense Force and the Morkani Transitional Council. The council, a concept previously unthinkable in Morkani society, consisted of 5 individuals who had chosen to separate partially from hive connections while maintaining the communication channels with their respective groups. "This ceasefire remains temporary and conditional," stated the lead Morkani representative, who called itself Catalyst. Its exoskeletal plates had been painted with individual markings, another unprecedented development. Many hives still reject the concept of individualization and view this dialogue as contamination. "We understand," Admiral Winters replied. She had surprised Jack by becoming one of the strongest advocates for the diplomatic approach after seeing its initial success. Societal change doesn't happen overnight. "Indeed," Catalyst agreed. "What your species accomplished in millennia of evolution, we are attempting to process in months. The discomfort is substantial." Jack listened as they discussed terms for continued non-aggression and potential cultural exchange. The situation remained fragile. Nearly a third of the Morkani hives had broken away entirely, viewing the individualists as a disease to be purged. There had been skirmishes, even what could only be described as civil war in some sectors. But the impossible had happened: communication, understanding, the beginning of change. As the meeting concluded, Catalyst approached Jack privately. "Commander Vance, the individual formerly known as Tactical Overseer requests your presence. It has established a separate compound on the outskirts of the neutral zone." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Nexus wants to see me." Catalyst paused, mandibles clicking softly. "They have been instrumental in guiding newly individualized Morkani through the transition. Many find the process traumatic without assistance." That evening, Jack took a shuttle to the coordinates provided. He found Nexus in a structure that blended Morkani and human architectural elements, a physical manifestation of the bridge being built between their species. "The Commander," Nexus greeted him, the translator now perfectly calibrated to its unique speech patterns. "Thank you for coming." "I was surprised by the invitation," Jack admitted. "Last I heard, you were working with the Transitional Council." "I was. I am. But I wanted to speak with you directly." The Morkani gestured with its upper right arm, a surprisingly human movement. "Do you understand what you did to me?" Jack was taken aback by the directness of the question. "I'm not sure When you chose not to kill me," Nexus interrupted, "when you showed mercy instead of expected violence, you did something worse than torture. You forced me to question. And questions, for a species built on absolute certainty, are more devastating than any weapon." "I never intended to." "Yes, you did," Nexus said. "But without anger, perhaps not consciously. But you recognized instinctively what would cause the most disruption to our system. Not death, we understand death. But mercy, compassion. These concepts were alien viruses to our collective consciousness." Jack was silent for a moment. "Do you regret it, becoming an individual?" Nexus's compound eyes fixed on him. "Regret is a concept I am still learning to process. There is pain in separation, loneliness, out, but also something your species values greatly: possibility, options that were invisible before. I cannot return to what I was. None of us can, once the question has been asked." "What question is that?" Jack asked. "What if we are wrong about what we are?" Nexus replied simply. "Your species' greatest weapon against us wasn't your technology or your tactics. It was your fundamental unpredictability. Humans choose when they could follow biological imperatives. You can override your programming, something we believed impossible." Jack smiled slightly. "We don't always make the right choices." "No," Nexus agreed. "But you make choices. And in that moment when you chose not to kill me, when all tactical logic dictated you demonstrated something that has now infected our entire species, the possibility of choice." As Jack prepared to leave, Nexus extended one of its arms in a surprisingly human gesture. The Morkani have a saying, or rather, add one: the hive endures while individuals perish. We believed this biological truth. Now, some of us are attempting to create a new truth through individuals. The hive evolves. Jack took the offered limb carefully. That sounds like progress. Not progress, Nexus corrected. Choice. Perhaps the most terrifying weapon humanity could have ever deployed against us. On the shuttle ride back to Epsilon 9, Jack stared out at the stars, thinking about the strange turns that had led to this moment. The Morkani conflict wasn't over. Change never came without resistance. But something fundamental had shifted, not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through one simple, unexpected act: choosing not to kill when killing would have been easier. Sometimes, Jack reflected, the most devastating thing you can do to an enemy isn't to destroy them, but to force them to question everything they believe about themselves. And not through violence, but through its unexpected absence. Humanity's unpredictability had proven more powerful than any weapon in their arsenal. And in that unpredictability lay not just hope for survival, but for something far more radical: understanding.